The following is a commercial-free community educational program brought to you by the Ethel and James Flinn Foundation, a Michigan-based private foundation dedicated to improving mental health treatment, and the Detroit Wayne Mental Health Authority, which serves adults and children with serious mental illness, intellectual and developmental disabilities, and substance use disorders.
Major depression with a psychotic effect. When she told me this, I was like, then you trying to say I'm crazy.
The least researched organ in our body is the brain.
I really looked back on some of my family members who were dealing with this, and guilt plagued me because I felt like I did not respond.
If somebody comes into a physician's office, are they thinking about treating the whole person? Are they really only looking at the physical symptoms?
You deny all of it, you push it away. And suicide was never on my radar screen, to be very honest, because I could not face it.
Unfortunately, what I heard more often than anything else, though, was really a sense of desperation.
Many of our children in our neighborhoods are suffering from PTSD, just like our men and women who have served abroad.
We wouldn't understand the impact of 22 veterans committing suicide every day without the loss of those three that touched our lives personally.
It's very difficult to reach out, particularly when society is saying there's something wrong with you.
Why do I have to have OCD? Why can't someone else have OCD?
The more we can integrate mental health and physical health together and coordinate those two as they care for the whole patient in a holistic manner, the better the treatment outcomes would be.
This affects every person, every family, every community.
It's a sign of strength to go get help. Let's do it.
Hello, and welcome to Opening Minds, Ending Stigma. I'm Cynthia Canty. 1 in 4 adults will experience mental illness. Serious mental illness not only hurts the person, it impacts their families and the economy to the tune of over $193 billion in lost wages in this country every year. Mental health disorders touch people in every zip code, every race, gender, and socioeconomic status. And that includes some people who are pretty successful, famous, and brilliant. Among them, Abraham Lincoln, Albert Einstein, Vincent van Gogh, and more recently, Princess Diana, Robin Williams, and Beyonce. As mental health has become a growing issue, so has the stigma, shame, and discrimination often associated with it. But research has shown people with a mental illness can be helped and can live full, successful lives with early diagnosis, treatment, and support. Mental illness refers to a wide range of conditions, hundreds of disorders that affect one's mood, thinking, and behavior. Examples include depression, schizophrenia, bipolar, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Millions of people around Michigan and across the globe are working to raise awareness about mental health disorders and to change outdated views about it. Many of us experience mental health challenges from time to time. But when the symptoms become more pronounced and impact one's ability to function, then things become far more serious, and that can be life-threatening.
I want to start by thanking
Michelle Obama spoke at the launch of the national campaign Change Direction. This campaign encourages Americans to care for their mental health and learn the signs of emotional distress. The nonprofit organization Give an Hour brings people together to change the culture of mental health so that we pay attention to our mental health just as we do our physical health.
So it is really time to flip the script on mental health in this country. It's time. It's time to tell everyone who's dealing with a mental health issue that they're not alone and that getting support and treatment isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. Yeah.
Kevin Fisher is executive director of Michigan's chapter of National Alliance on Mental Illness. He's fighting to turn the conversation about mental illness into a kitchen table topic to remove the stigma.
He was diagnosed in November of 2007, and June 27, 2010, we lost him. And he had not indicated any thoughts of suicide that day or leading up to that. And however, he quietly dismissed himself that morning. His mom assumed that he had wandered off to a church down the street that he liked to attend. And so she last saw him around 9:30 in the morning. And it wasn't until approximately 4 in the afternoon that she discovered, when she went to make a final check of her storage bin, that he had hung himself. I am guilty of what I think many in our society are, which is we don't think about mental illness and mental health care until it hits us at home. And that's something that I'd like to change.
Imagine having cancer or diabetes or high blood pressure and being afraid to tell someone about it for fear of being ostracized or bullied. Decades ago, people with mental illness were often shipped off to hospitals and institutions where they lived out their lives. Thankfully, things have changed.
There's more energy behind improving things today than I've ever seen before. And I think it gives me, it should give us all a lot of confidence that if we take this momentum and put a real push behind it, that we can see some real change.
The Ethel and James Flinn Foundation is a Michigan-based foundation established in 1976 to put a spotlight on improving mental health services.
Mental health and physical health are funded separately and treated differently. We need to move to a system of care that treats the whole person effectively. Too many people have to languish until they're in an emergency situation or in a crisis before they get the care that they need. We are working to change that.
From the White House to the streets of cities all across Michigan, there is a rallying cry to end the stigma about mental illness.
2 siblings, my younger brother, my older brother, took their own lives. That's a powerful reminder of how debilitating and how this disease, if not diagnosed, if not treated, if we have so much stigma for these issues within our communities that people won't reach out and get the help they need, it can have deadly consequences. And that doesn't just impact my brothers and their immediate family. It impacted a whole lot of people.
Michigan's Senator Debbie Stabenow is another who knows about families dealing with mental illness. Her father, Robert Lee Garner, suffered from bipolar disorder. It wasn't until she was a student in a psychology class at Michigan State University that she learned about bipolar disorder, which changed everything for her dad, who got treatment.
I saw firsthand what happens when you accurately diagnose and when there is hope. And now we have even more hope, because when we talk about someone who's bipolar, we can manage that chemical imbalance in the brain just as you would manage sugar in terms of diabetes or any other serious chronic disease.
Senator Stabenow has been a champion for those dealing with mental health disorders. Along with Republican Senator Roy Blunt of Missouri, she fought to get the Excellence in Mental Health bill passed in 2014. This will bring much-needed funding to community mental health programs. Studies show mental health issues aren't the result of one event. Research suggests multiple causes, from genetics to environment. A stressful living situation can make some people more susceptible, as many soldiers have found upon returning home after serving our country.
He shouldn't have had to feel like he was the only one. We wouldn't understand the impact of 22 veterans committing suicide every day without the loss of those 3 that touched our lives personally. My name is Andrew Turner. I joined the National Guard here in Michigan when I guess in 2002, deployed to Iraq in 2005 as a medic for a field artillery unit out of Detroit. Spent a year in Iraq and then came home, continued to serve in the Guard.
This is my medic bag that I had. I carried this with me every day when I was overseas. And I came home and put it in a closet and didn't open it again for almost 10 years.
Whenever I was doing my medic training initially, what they say is, like in war, everybody sees injured soldiers or everybody comes across that, but the medics see all the injured soldiers. I was out there every day ready to go. I mean, the stress is always there because you never know what's going to happen. You never know what's around the corner. On the mental health side of it, it's not something that we dealt with or discussed or had any kind of preparation for, no. My issues with mental health, I guess, initially started when I would come home. I wouldn't know what was going on. I would just, like, the only thing I could describe it as like a mental funk. And it was not just that something wasn't right with me, it's that I couldn't function, I couldn't drive, I couldn't focus on things. It was like periods of my life that I was losing where I would just be on the couch for seriously like a month at a time.
When he would have episodes like this, I would become like the primary caretaker. So I would make sure he was taking a shower, make sure he had something to eat, make sure he was sleeping. You know, you get in like this autopilot, sort of like getting through the day, and then, like you said, like a switch was flipped, and then one day he'd just be fine. And I was like, oh, okay, well, now we're back to normal, and then I just keep an eye on him until it happened again.
The first time I felt like it was bad enough that I needed to go to the hospital was at Thanksgiving dinner. And like we had a huge spread on the table, and it was just so overwhelming that I couldn't make a decision on even something as simple as putting a plate of food together. There was no courage from me when I sought help. It was pure desperation. I was almost like hoping they would find a brain tumor, because then I could say, aha, here's the problem. So now let's take care of it. Now let's get it out, and then I'll be normal again. I feel like I've been healthy mentally for close to 3 years. I think that it's just a misconception that if you have a mental health issue or illness, that it's a reflection on your character. When I felt like I was in my darkest period, like like my worst rock bottom, like that's the best way to describe it, just like being very dark. Like my life felt dark. And getting the help that I needed was like somebody just lighting a flashlight in the dark. And when I had another family or a friend that was dealing with an issue, he said he wanted to be a flashlight in the dark for his friend that was struggling. And I think that's my goal in being a part of this, is to, you know, be a flashlight in that darkness.
Leaders across Michigan are also working to help veterans and others deal with mental health issues. The state's Community Health and Human Services departments recently merged into the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. The goal? To deliver services more efficiently.
The merger into this new department will be great news for those who are receiving services. It's really about assuring coordination and integration of care regardless of the type of situation an individual or family needs. If a person comes into a DHS office, we should be able to help coordinate them with other services that the state's providing, whether they be in public health, behavioral health, or physical health through our Medicaid program.
Depression and bipolar disorders affect millions of people from all walks of life. Even successful executives like Heinz Prechter, who founded the American Sunroof Company and was a force on the national political stage.
My late husband died by suicide on July 6, 2001, after having suffered from bipolar. Obviously, we were not really aware of that diagnosis. He never had that. He had depression as a diagnosis. He died by suicide. My children and I decided we had to do something about his insidious illness. There were not very many answers out there. It was very difficult to fight it. To come out with it was difficult in the first place. To say it to the public was a difficult thing in the first place. And I think that was my impetus, my push. The pain of losing him to something that insidious made me go after this illness. When we first met, he was always very, very, very optimistic of extremely optimistic person, which to me was very attractive. I was pregnant, we were married for 3 years, and he came down with this incredible depression, paralyzing depression, and we did not know what to do. Later on in '92, he had another one of these tremendous depressions where he would just absolutely sit in a chair, be frozen to the chair, not move for 8 hours, and I took him to the doctor, and that's when we knew for sure. He was not okay till the kids were 9 months old. Took a year and a half. He was not diagnosed as having bipolar or manic depressive illness. He was diagnosed with major depressive disorder. And there's a difference because if you give people antidepressants, they will ramp up and go into mania, and then they will crash. Again, I'm not a doctor, but I know that is what happens, and that's what happened to him the last year of his life. He would always feel that he was weak. It was his own fault. Things like that, very old notions of having this kind of illness because he looked at it as a weakness of his own versus a physical illness. Once we discovered this word and the definition, we tried to figure out how can we label people and so forth, and obviously you don't want to do that. So because of that, you need really good science to stand behind it, to understand what the differences are, what makes it different, and at the same time also come up with how do I help people? What are the solutions to make people feel better and have a good quality of life? And then the stigma will go away. But I do agree with you. I think we are over-analyzing, over-labeling today. I think we have to be very rational about it and come up with the science first, educate people, become aware, and then have the good research to back it up. The Heinz Ziebrechte Fund for Manic Depression, it was called at the time, and today it's called the Heinz Ziebrechte Bipolar Research Fund. And it has a way wider mission and vision than the original fund ever had. And it's a tremendous development and incredibly good for the fund because we are in a position today to find real biological answers for an illness that needs it so desperately.
Research shows nearly half of mental health disorders show up by age 14, and 75% of disorders show up by the time someone is 24 years old. Tragically, suicide is the third leading cause of death of this age group. Our young people are vulnerable. Protecting them requires parents, caregivers, schools, and doctors work on their mental health as well as their physical health. Early intervention is key. Meet Lexi Ronikowski. She is living with and working on her anxiety and obsessive-compulsive disorder.
Why do I have to have OCD? Why can't someone else have OCD? All I have to do is the face. I was just full of stress, and I just need something to keep my mind off my stress. I would just pick at my skin until it was like all bloody, picking my eyelashes until like there's like a bare spot. There should be like a cure for OCD. So if a kid has OCD, they can just take a medicine or get a treatment that gets rid of their OCD. All this stuff is overwhelming to me in the beginning, but now I'm starting to get used to it. So I'm starting to be able to get through my OCD and just live a normal life.
Too often, the public only hears about tragedies associated with people who have mental illness. The reality is, people with mental illness are more likely to be victims of crime than the general public.
But this business about there must be some evidence that they've been dangerous to self or others, I don't think we ought to wait that long, especially if you can see a loved one who's starting to have difficulties. Why not get them some help?
Often, it's first responders like Detroit Police Chief James Craig and his officers who are dealing with a suspect who may have mental illness. More officials support mental health first aid, which is a national effort to help train communities to identify, understand, and respond to mental illness and substance use disorders.
We collectively, and funding's the key, need to do a better job. And this is not an indictment of Michigan. It certainly is a national issue. What is the federal government doing to support this issue? I mean, how many more large-scale, horrific events that we've determined are because of mentally ill persons not being treated? How many police officers should lose their life? How many citizens? I mean, so it's a crisis.
Instead of receiving treatment, Too many people with mental illness in Michigan are behind bars or are in shelters for the homeless. Research estimates that 1 in 5 people who are incarcerated and 1 in 4 adults in shelters have some sort of mental illness. When recognizing and treating mental illness is delayed, it takes a toll. That's why Frank Taylor is talking about mental illness and trying to help others.
I have 2 girls and a son. I would get moody. I would get very depressed. I would rather stay in a house, something I'd never done, than to go outside for days at a time. But as the kids got older, I started realizing they would be leaving pretty soon. So I got off into things that I thought were going to help me. And it was different kind of drugs. I graduated to crack, which was really a downspin in my life where I lost my family, my daughters, my kids. I lost everything. As the years went by, I became homeless, got in a little trouble here and there. But there wasn't a stop to it because I felt that that was the only thing that was going to keep me up, was to use drugs. It was like, I'd be down, I go get high. I did a whole year in a rehab that was at a share house. And Lord behold, in a week I was back doing the same thing I was doing. I went into a rehab at share house again, and I talked to a case manager, and the case manager looked at me, she said, there's got to be something wrong with you besides this using these drugs all the time. And I told her, no, I can stop. I've been there 3 times already. I was sent to a center, and I got, went there, got diagnosed with major depression with the psychotic effect. When she told me this, I was like, then you trying to say I'm crazy? And she said, no, you're not crazy. It's just that some people have imbalance, and that some people never get it taken care of. Medically, we can help you balance yourself out. I seen changes come about in my life that was like really, really strange, and I had no answers for them, but they were for the good of me. My kids live out of town now. We're talking. My daughter calls me. She's going to school, and she's surprised that I'm going to school now. So that's a conversation we can have together now. You think about the people that say you couldn't do it, and then now you're doing it. So that shows you can do it. People that I work with, I let them know that there's hope. I let them know that you can still do anything that you want to do if you put your head mind to it. There's something that they say I couldn't do, or I believe that I couldn't do. Don't stop because you have a little of this going on, a little of this going on. You're still a person, and you still can do something. Do not give up. If you give up, what happens to you then? A lot of times I doubted myself, but the support I have from different people, they told me I can do it. And I'm doing pretty good, I think. And it's coming along. I got a long ways to go, but I'm working it.
Education about mental health can speed diagnosis, treatment, and recovery. To seek help often takes strength and perseverance.
My name is Nikki Rashes, and I am 37 years old. I had symptoms from the time I was very young. My main, what I would call a break, happened when I was in my senior year of high school. About 18 years old, my grandfather was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Lost my grandfather, my other grandfather, and a close family friend all within 3 months, and did not bounce back the way a person would. Severe depression, and went through a good 5.5 years trying to find decent treatment, trying to find medications that worked. For me, depression was a lot of apathy. I couldn't see the point to doing anything. I couldn't see a future. Now I have a psychiatrist who I see in person every 6 months. I speak with her by phone every month. I am not in therapy currently, but I am presently taking a class on mindfulness meditation for anxiety and depression.
I'll admit, it's very frustrating. When she goes through depression, the thing she needs from me most is just to hold her. And there's nothing I can do to get her out of the depression. It's a very frustrating situation because I know there's nothing I can do. With proper treatment, just about anyone with mental illness can be a productive member of society.
As with cancer and heart disease, mental illness is treatable. Recovery is possible when someone begins treatment early and continues to play a strong role in their mental health. Family, friends, and peer support are equally important on the continuous road to recovery. By opening minds to mental illness, to routine screening, diagnosis, and treatment, to raising awareness in the community, primary care, and schools, we can end the stigma. I'm Cynthia Canty. Thank you for watching Opening Minds, Ending Stigma.
The reaction to mental illness as if it is not a treatable medical condition is probably the biggest stigma and misconception.
All of us, if we want to get rid of these things in our families, have to become champions for research and clinical delivery to where the people are. And that's in clinical settings, not just psychiatry offices. Certainly they count, but everywhere where the doctor sees the person who's struggling, maybe with pains, maybe with sleep, maybe with whatever else. When we do that, we're going to just kick this.
I think the most important thing for us to remember is that mental illness is like any other illness. We shouldn't have a different belief if it's illness above the neck rather than below the neck.
The most common misconception about young people are A, they're violent, they're odd, they marginalize themselves, they don't do well in school, they're not strong academically, they're weird. So there are a lot of these misconceptions, all of them false. It's really about identification, education, and getting them help.
We have to be courageous and audacious enough to say, okay, let's put the smartest folks together and give the funding and give the goal and let's get it done. We have done it with other things. And we can do that.
It is a medical problem, not a self-control or behavioral problem.
I felt like I was the only one that had an issue. And it's no fun being different. I just want to be like anyone else.
If we can be very intentional about that, not to just leave it to chance, but to be very intentional about pushing this conversation, expanding this conversation all the way around the calendar and throughout all of our communities, that we'll see pretty amazing outcomes and the world will be better for it.